Welcome to Scotch and Watch. It must be Friday. It must be 5 o'clock. I'm Ricky. I have a Scotch. Welcome. And I am joined by,
Good morning, Chris Duncan, and I just get to watch with a large
and
cup of
you're
coffee and a big smile on my face
in London.
in
So
London.
we're
Yeah.
we're covering half the world. Oh my goodness, man. What a week. Are we winning?
Well, that's the big. I thought this during the course of the week. I was trying to summarize with someone everything that was happening, and I was sort of saying, well, this is going, this is going, this is going, and you start to get to the point where you think, for a long time, it's felt like a lot of work was being done in the background, but still relentlessly the kind of everything ground on. And this week, for the first time, you start to think, do you know what? Actually, there is going to be
You're right.
substantial structural material change, and that is a good thing to see.
So, mate, how long have you been in the industry?
Oh, gee, 25 years.
Yeah, so it's probably 35 for me. And so I know. But seriously though, I don't think I've ever seen regulatory change on this scale. I mean, I was kind of there's that joke. You've got that joke in London, haven't you? That you wait your entire life for a bus and then two arrive at the same time. I've
Yeah,
waited 25 years for an antitrust trial, and I've got two taking place in the same courthouse on the same day.
yeah. I
I've
love
never
that.
been
I
so
love that.
busy.
That picture this week of literally the sign in the lobby of the courthouse with like turn left for Google, turn right for Facebook.
Absolutely.
It's something that you never really expected to see. So,
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. So we're going to be talking about what's been going on in the repercussions of those trials today. There is a whole ton going on, so we should probably get into it. Also today, for those of you, just in case there wasn't enough going on,
mm,
Alphabet also issued its Q1 financials today, bringing everybody up to speed with where it is with its earnings. So I don't know if is that good. That's probably as good a place to start as anywhere, isn't it?
start there. Yeah, start there.
All right. So um, quite a few people through this newsletter and through these conversations that we have been approaching me saying, "Oh, look, Google's going to, is Google going to struggle here? Is it going to suffer?" Look, the answer to that is absolutely yes, but it's probably not going to happen straight away. And so it's got such a large monopoly and so much momentum that, we're not really going to see the impact of that for a while. So what we saw in the numbers today was that it reported a 12% rise in revenue for the quarter, which takes it just ever so slight, just a smidgen over $90 billion, which is, obviously a massive number. But when you actually and Chris, you know this,
Mm,
it's become a bit of a thing for me to dive really deeply into the numbers, into the financial reporting that it gives to the SEC, because I'm looking for key things that give you some idea about what momentum is going on and
mm.
what's actually happening inside Google, because they can move this money around anywhere they want. You've owned the
Yeah,
P&L, I've owned the
yeah.
P&L. That's what you can do, right? And so the interesting thing is that Google is an ads company. It's not a search company. It does search, but it makes its money from advertising. But interestingly enough, if you analyze its earnings over the last 10, 15 years, the percentage of revenue that it makes from its total revenue from ads has been declining. So it's about 16% down over the decade in its percentage. It's still
Mm,
80 odd, but it's
mm.
come down an awful lot. And this, Google says this is because it's diversifying its revenues. But if you dive into the numbers and have a really good look around, it's not really diversifying its revenues at all. The only other thing it's got of any scale really is cloud. And that's only 10 billion of 350.
Mm.
So it's not an important number. So this isn't about it diversifying. It's actually losing market share. So that's interesting. That means that some of the money is going elsewhere. But the numbers I really, really, really pay attention to are YouTube, because I think there's a high probability that Google might decide to spin off YouTube at some point, at which point it
Mhm.
goes after the broadcasting industry. So those numbers were flat. So that's a bit of a surprise because they've been going quite well recently. They've been going up 10, 12,
Mm.
13%. They flattened out. But the number I was really focused on, and the one that I think most of the people on this call will be most interested in, is the number that relates to the ad network. So this is basically Google's programmatic service. So it's all those ads that you open up the pipe to let them serve their ads from AdX onto your page. Now, I've been reporting for about 2 years now that these have been coming down
Mm.
almost exactly the same level every quarter for a while. And it feels like it's Google's reducing the amount it's sending down the pipe to the publishing industry and to the rest of the open web that relies on it, and self-preferencing the money back into itself
Yeah.
on search ads and on AI ads. And so, sure enough, again, same thing happened. So on that, we saw a 4% decline. So that takes the amount of money that Google, of its $300 billion a year of global advertising revenue, the amount it sends to the rest of the open web and every publisher in the world is now 6.4 billion, which
Mm.
sounds like a lot, but it's the entire open web's advertising. So it's got 294 billion,
Yeah.
and it's sending six to everybody else. That $6.4 billion number is the lowest number it's shared since 2020.
And reflected by any publisher that you talk to. This story that there's less traffic coming from Google, that it's of a different quality, that that they're kind of, this has been coming down consistently over time. So you're absolutely right. It turns up in the numbers just as it turns up in the market.
Yeah. And the strange thing is those numbers are public. Anybody can go and search for those. I think that, the industry to a large extent has worked on trust. There's been a bond, hasn't there? There's been an
Mm.
agreement. We'll write the articles, you send us the traffic, you help us sell the ads, and we're all a winner. But we're not all a winner. There's only been one winner, which is why we're antitrust. And I think that's quite a neat segue
Yeah.
over to let's
Just
talk
just
about the
for just before
breakup.
you do, I thought
Yeah.
it was interesting to look at, if you look at Sundar Pichai's summary note, which is the
Mm.
kind of, so the chief exec's note on a kind of on this kind of earnings release is the, whatever's in the numbers, this is a story that I want to tell.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
and sometimes they're connected, sometimes they're not. But it was very interesting when you look at he'd said it's 1.5 billion users of AI overviews. It's 250 million subscribers, predominantly through YouTube. It's an increase in cloud earnings. And you kind of went down and you were thinking, as you kept, I think the ninth point or something that he made was, oh, by the way, we also make a little bit of money from advertising. But
Yeah.
so it's very interesting that Google themselves are now sort of almost positioning themselves as a company that, yeah, sure, we happen to have this 300 billion, advertising monster in the basement, but that's not really what we want to talk about. And I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, well, all right. So let's talk about that from your and my
Mm,
personal experience. So you've presented to boards, you've
mm.
presented these financial results to boards. Um, what's your experience? What do you think is going on
Well,
there?
I mean, those kind of the way that I think the listed companies work, obviously, is you're actually presenting two sets of results ahead. So
Mhm.
the notes that you get from the CEO are saying, I'm telling you something now that I'm predicting what's going to be in the next set of results and the set of results after that. And the market doesn't like surprises. So if there's something coming in terms of a change in the state of the business, a lot of those notes are about signaling changes that are happening in terms of the things that the business is prioritizing.
Yeah, it's
And
a signal.
the market's result, the response to that is generally we either agree with the direction you're heading in or we kind of don't agree. And the market reaction yesterday was, pretty flat, right? It was kind of like, this is kind of what we expected. Um, what's also worth pointing out is that the market right now, I mean, there's a lot going on that isn't anything to do with kind of Google themselves. They're down massively in the last 3 months because everybody is.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and so that's sort of already priced in, and the market won't price in things like breakups because they won't believe that that's coming in the next kind of two sets of quarterly results, maybe three sets of quarterly results, and they're not really pricing much further than that. So I think
yeah. I
that's
think
why
that's
you
right.
see this disconnect between what we're talking about in terms of what can happen in the kind of existential breakup side and the kind of market response to what is, any other company would be fairly pleased with the set of results that they put out. These two things at the moment haven't quite caught up with each other. That'd be my take.
I'll tell you what my take was that so Google's down 17% since the start of the year.
Mm,
Okay, so that's a pretty painful number. I appreciate we've got tariffs. I appreciate we've got a general downturn.
mm,
I appreciate all of that, but there is also some losing ground, a little bit of discomfort about the brand and its potentially its longevity. So those are happening. It went up 4%.
mm,
Okay, after these results, so it's kind of a bit of a recovery, but it's still 13% down for the year, and that's not really been Google's experience for a long time.
mm,
The thing that alarmed me in the numbers, if I was an investor, And it came up partly in the numbers. It was kind of alluded to in the numbers, but it came up more actually in the antitrust trial, is where Google is in AI and where it is in its race or its attempt to keep up with the space race that is AI. And there was a slide, a beautiful slide. I don't know if you saw it, that was presented by the FTC. It was an internal Google document. And it was talking about where it was a Google slide prepared by Google's internal teams and then shared by the FTC. Sorry, to be clear, it was a slide created by Google for internal use only that the FTC got its hands on and made public in the court. And it was talking about how Gemini is comparing to ChatGPT and others in the space. And this was a slide as of March 28th, so a month ago. And it had Gemini had 350 million monthly active users on its Gemini AI. 350 million. Meta had 800 million on its AI. So that doesn't get talked about a lot. And ChatGPT had 600 million monthly active users on its platform, right? So Gemini was a distant third place on this. But what was also interesting on the slide was how many daily queries are being posted to those AIs. Now, remember that Microsoft, that never gets talked about, it's kind of the forgotten, we'll just leave it over here. Microsoft has integrated ChatGPT into pretty much everything. Rebranded it Copilot here and a little bit there, and it's in Bing everywhere. So the number of daily queries, okay, ready? Daily queries to ChatGPT is 1.2 billion, right? And Gemini's is 140 million.
Yeah.
Now, if the entire future of your business is going to be based on the valuation of your ability to go after the AI world, with all the money it's spending and all of the momentum it's got and all the staff it's got and the fact that its ad business is going backwards, that felt like that felt a bit embarrassing.
Do you know what? It made me wonder though. Does that mean that they're not counting AI overviews as queries? That would make a bit of sense if they would just say, well, that wasn't a direct. That was actually a search query that we gave an AI overview to.
Oh, I don't think so. That would have to be in those numbers because the AI overview is returned by Gemini.
Yeah, but in which case it doesn't quite tie up with the 1.5 billion users of AI overviews number, unless that's skewed. Yeah. Anyway. But so did you see this week they sort of rolled out Demis DeepMind, who actually I have a lot. I mean, incredible kind of scientist. But I think the three things they said was we were going to be able to simulate the flight of a hummingbird or something. We were going to cure all known disease, and we were going to be able to understand the speech of dolphins. And if that was one of the kind of that I just remember those as a three, which is three things. Certainly two of those three, curing all known illnesses, I'm a big fan of. The other two, I haven't spent a great deal of time worrying about, if I'm honest.
That's right. We got David Attenborough for that. Yeah. So I've got the reason I shrugged and the reason I did my kind of like about him is that he said something that I thought was so unbelievably tone deaf a couple of months ago. He was on stage, he was being interviewed by somebody, and he set off and just said, there's an understanding amongst the public that everything on the open web is fair use and we can use it for anything we want. And, everybody knows that's the case. Everybody accepts that true. And you heard that the oxygen disappear from the room because no one thought that was true. And you kind of got you got a really clear view at that moment of how the thinking is inside these companies. Because that's what I worry about most about, actually, let's talk about it because it's a good moment to talk about this. So there was a protest today outside Meta where a whole load of parents whose children died or were sold drugs and died or were bullied and killed themselves all went to Meta's headquarters today to protest. And I know a lot of those parents, and they were all sending me pictures from there and sharing their information. And I had a real retrospective because as a journalist, I was taught by mentors very early in my career that it doesn't matter what goes on in the world. Lots of things happen in the world all the time. But all that really matters is the impact on people and the impact on society. And that's the most important thing of all. And I'm not trying to make it sound too worthy, but what's the point researching it or investigating it or writing it if you're not trying to get a better outcome for people? There's no point just doing it for shock and awe, right? And so I was just super, super disappointed to then hear Google say, well, look, everything on the web's just fair use. We'll just use it to create a new way for us to sell more advertising. It
Mm.
completely defeats and misses the point of the societal benefit of what we do. You can argue about copyright. I think that's fine. But what's the point of building amazing, earth shattering technology if it doesn't make the world better for people? And I'm not entirely sure that learning how a fucking dolphin talks helps.
I suppose it depends what they say.
Which is an excellent point. That's why you're the smart one in this.
Should we jump to the court cases? So
Yeah.
we sort of started out saying, I mean, these are you feel like in these they're sort of moving through each week. There's a bunch of characters arrive. So let's talk about we'll just do I think the highlights of this week. Which one do you want to start with, Meta or Google?
Let's start with Meta and Kevin Systrom.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. I knew that was coming. That was like a car accident 8 years in the coming. That one. It was like, this is going to be good. He was awesome, by the way. Goodness me. But look, I'm sure a lot of confidence comes with having like $3 billion in cash in the bank, but he was good. He was good. You can tell there's no love lost. He was the first one really to get up there and just go, actually, let's just call BS on this, right? Yeah. What did you think?
I thought it was a good kind of alpha male. I built a platform. He built a platform. He bought my platform because mine was better than his. He never really liked the fact mine was better than his, and he kind of tried to strangle it without really saying that. And eventually left. I mean, I thought it was underneath everything. That was very much a kind of. You could still sense that what he really wanted to say in court was, I think we all know my platform was bigger and better than his.
That's right. It was a bit of a dick fest. Yeah. It was like that. Well, don't you think that's actually what I wrote on the newsletter? Yeah. It was egos at 12 o'clock. Yeah. And I would have loved to have been in some of the meetings where he and Zuck were like interacting, because I can't imagine there was much love lost between them, right?
No, and it's some fascinating. I mean, it's sort of a real glimpse, I think, into what it must be like inside those companies. We were talking about, we had a growth team, then it disappeared. We had a compliance team, then we did.
I woke up in the morning and it wasn't there. Yeah. It was very good.
Yeah.
What did you think of what did you think of Cheryl?
Really, let's just refer real insight, I think, also into the negotiation, just in terms of all the different players, how all the different kind of PE houses or whatever were kind of trying to get the price that they could get. The kind of what you call the chairman's wave of Zuckerberg kind of going for 9 billion, no bollocks, let's make it whatever, let's make it this number. Sorry, that was WhatsApp, but yeah, just the ability to increase a bid because you really wanted it. So I think I mean in terms of his sort of impact on the case, I thought you couldn't come out of his testimony thinking anything other than he'd been bought out of the competition. I thought it was pretty clear. Some of the others maybe not so much, but that one was pretty clear.
Yeah, so I think on balance, I mean, where are we now? We're what, 2 weeks in now, right? So I don't think there's any doubt that the FTC is making a good case. It's making a better case than I thought they would, actually. I was a bit worried, but they seem to be doing quite well. I don't think they've landed a killer blow yet. I think that the DOJ had landed more than this in the Google trial at this point. Yeah. But there's a difference, though. I think people generally, and we talked about this a bit the last week, I think people generally like Google, and I think people generally dislike Mark Zuckerberg. And so you maybe the burden of evidence doesn't have to be quite so strong when you already really dislike the person that's in the court.
Yeah, I think I'm slightly bearish on this one, because I think ultimately they've got to prove the case, which they're sort of edging towards, but they also have to then decide what the remedy kind of side is. And I say retrospective demerger is a big deal. To say, like, we're going to go back 10 years and tell you can't have done things you did in history. You can't go back and Back to the Future it. So the precedent that they would set in doing that, I think, would have to have a very high bar to entry, because otherwise everyone who's bought a company in the last 10 years is going, well, hang on a minute, if we bought that improved our market competitiveness, are we going to get dragged in with the FTC? So I'm slightly, I think I'm technically bearish. Emotionally, I'm all in, but technically, I think it's whether they can get to a kind of a judgment that that has teeth, I think, rather than just a kind of fine and a
I,
rollover.
I'll tell you one thing though. The major difference between this and the Google trial, right? And it's almost impossible to. They're so
Mm,
interconnected. They're
mm,
so similar. The interesting thing on this one though is that if the court decided that it wanted to split these companies up, Kevin Systrom is stood right there ready to say, "Yeah, thanks very much.
yeah,
I'll take it back.
yeah,
It's no problem at all." It's not like you can't find a buyer,
no,
right? There are plenty of people that will happily take those businesses back. And so it's different in the Google trial because if Google does decide that it's or that Chrome has to be spun off, then that's going to turn into that's utter chaos.
yeah,
Everybody's throwing their name in the hat, but I don't know how any of these people are going to execute it. Whereas we're over here with Meta, I think the carve off's really simple. It's a really simple slice and dice. And here you go, Kevin. And here you go, Jan, over here at WhatsApp.
yeah,
Have it all back and let's keep on going. Let's
yeah.
just erase the last decade and just go again. So it feels to me like that's a harder verdict, an easier remedy.
And if I gave you, the odds, and I said, okay, I'm going to give you one of those two. Do you want the Blue app? Do you want Instagram in that competition? Which would you take?
I'd take WhatsApp.
Would you?
I would. Yeah, I think WhatsApp. I think Instagram's a choice, and somebody can bring out a better one. I think that Facebook's a choice, and people have already found a better one. Yeah, namely Instagram, right? But I think WhatsApp is something else. I think WhatsApp is unique in its space. What does it fight with? Messenger, Apple, all those kinds of things, but it does so much more. I don't use Insta at all. I don't use Facebook at all. I use WhatsApp 24 times a day. So for me, I think the one that has real longevity, scale, the ability to expand into new spaces is that. Isn't it funny that, effectively a cooler way to text is more valuable than this giant tech company? But that's basically my view.
Well, it's interesting.
What about you?
I think I'd probably take Instagram, to be honest, because I probably would bet on video over the other kind of parts. And
you also want to delete all those photos you put on there last birthday. Is that the reason?
Yeah, I think I'm not really Instagram material, don't you? Much more podcast material, to be honest. Yeah, there's some pushback this week actually on. I think they've put AI into WhatsApp, and I just read a couple of pieces where people say, "Whoa, hang on a minute. What do you mean this is kind of connected to the meta world?" So we'll see how that goes down.
But that's another reason why it's the right one, because no one did that with Insta, right? And so people were so protective of Insta. It just tells me that the real engagement logic. I mean, for those of you who don't know, when Meta bought bought WhatsApp. Let's do the numbers. Let's do both numbers. When they bought Instagram was adding 25,000 new users a day. Okay. WhatsApp was doing 800,000 a day. 800,000. So, that's what momentum looks like. Yeah? And the two guys that were running it are these wild geeks that really got no interest whatsoever, probably looking at the chart that goes like this and just go, back to the day job. Amazing.
That was one other thing from Systrom's thing, wasn't it? That he had, I think he had some ridiculous, like 13 employees or something at the time. It was like incredible technical achievement. Go on AWS with 13 people. I mean, there's well done him. Was there anything else in the Meta trial, or should we? You mentioned Cheryl.
No.
Was there anything else?
Well, look, I thought Cheryl was a little bit kind of underwhelming. There's a lot of bad blood between her and Zuck. We didn't see any of it. I think that was a shame. Look, my personal take, just to close out on the Meta trial, because we're very early on, right? So the Meta trial's really just building momentum. But my main feeling about the Meta trial is that I think they've done the witnesses in the wrong order. I think what they should have done is got Systrom up first and started to get some dirt flowing. Yeah. And then drop in Zuck way down the list when they've really got some stuff to ask him. Yeah. By putting him up first, it was kind of he had months to prepare for what he was going to say. Yeah. And there was nothing unexpected. There was no left field stuff coming because he'd already read all the court papers and had 50 lawyers go
Yeah,
over it. I just think they did them in the wrong order. I think they should have put him up last. But
yeah.
anyway,
Well, you
I'm
want
not the
the
FTC.
you want the Jack Nicholson. Did you order the code red on the stand? That's what you're.
Well, that if the FTC wants to win, it has to land some punches, right? And
Yeah,
it all feels a little bit too kind of friendly. I mean, it took a lot longer in the Google trials to put Sundar Pichai up, and when they did put him up, they had some real
yeah.
things to go after. I just think they just got the order wrong. But look, I still think they win. I think you're bearish on it. I'm a little bit more kind of hawkish on it, just because I think, look, I know it's a judge, not a jury,
Mm,
but I do think that there is a desperate need for change that can be measured in upset and trauma all over the
mm,
world. But more than that, it can also be measured in damage to democracy,
mm.
all kinds of things. I just think that if a court exists to ensure that society has rules and regulations, guardrails, and stays
Yeah.
on track, I think it has to do something here.
Anyone on the call, by the way, who hasn't read the Sarah Wynne Williams book, I highly recommend it. I think it just in it's brilliantly paced. Actually, so her testimony was very good, but the book is worth reading. On top of that,
Mhm.
it's very well paced in terms of how it kind of goes through the heady kind of early days of Facebook connecting everybody and the Arab Spring and this kind of sense that it was a great beacon of hope and this gradual kind of realization that if it could change democracy in one way, it could also change it in the other, and it could be used in ways that they had not foreseen. And the book's called Careless People for a reason, and the lack of kind of attention to that comes through very strongly. I'd highly recommend it.
Have you got
One
it there
lovely
on
bit
the
of
desk?
I don't even know. I think it's upstairs.
Put
The
it
um
upstairs.
the one lovely bit of color, which you'll appreciate from your journalist days. I think Mark Zuckerberg came straight out of the court, jumped in his $500 million yacht, and went heli skiing in Norway. Is that right? That was. I just thought that was
Well,
a lovely. It's just a lovely kind of.
it
Just a
was
lovely
really
bit of color.
irritating. It was really irritating because he was right next to my yacht, which is embarrassing, obviously. Um, look, I don't mean to be rude or anything. I'm sure there's some people from Facebook on here, but what a
Mm.
dick. I mean, seriously, like, just get over yourself. So let's move on to Google. All right, what are your takeaways from Google so far? Because I'm really enjoying this one.
So I thought Google's kind of gone. I think Google's treading the path of every kind of every corporate idea that I've ever worked with, which is it goes to this. We should do this. Brilliant. That's a brilliant idea. And then there's this sort of trough period where everyone goes, but practically, how would we do this? There's all these kind of complications, and I felt like this week we kind of jumped into um, that sort of trough, which is everyone started to go, whoa, 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 hang on. If we actually have to sell off Chrome, what does that mean?
Yeah,
And where would it go? And who would buy it? And what would that look like? And by the way, it's Chrome and it's Chromium and it costs $1 billion to run. And I think that so the sense was for me this week, this one sort of hit the sludge a bit. But then you have to realize that is because that's the lawyers. Um,
yeah,
you have to realize that that's inevitable, but it's also part of the recognition that structural remedy is coming. So you wouldn't
yeah,
get into that kind of level of debate around it if it was still hypothetical. So
yeah.
actually, in some ways, it's kind of a necessary process to go through, and it did throw out some quite interesting things. So I think the suddenly now you've got Perplexity. So Perplexity kind of came out. Not, I think they
Yeah.
actually testified. Came out and said, "Well, we basically build on top of this, and we would rather Google owned it. We'd buy it, obviously, but we'd rather Google owned it and gave it to us for free because that's generally Perplexity's kind of view of the world is that everyone should give them everything for free. And
Yeah.
we really don't want OpenAI to buy it. And OpenAI said, well, we'd buy it. We would quite like it because we're talking about building a social network. We need access to data that we can basically freely harvest without asking users directly. And so we'd buy it as well. And so the other sense this week was actually where that structural remedy ends up is going to be pretty interesting. The
Mhm.
third thing I would probably say from the sludge bit of this week is some reporting by kind of Lara O'Reilly, Business Insider, and from DigiDay. kind of coming back from the marketing side of the world, going, God, Jesus, isn't this all a bit of a, this is going to just be, this is just something else to think about.
Mm.
A little bit of kind of weariness from publishers that we don't really know what it's going to look like yet. Will it really be that good? And oh my God, what if that means we have to do some work? And so yeah, I felt this week actually that the case is progressing, but there was a little bit of kind of reality bites, I think, for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Let's go first to the publisher piece, yeah, because
Mm,
I've been getting that. I've been getting those vibes as well, not vibes. I've been getting those direct responses. Look, if you spend 25 years whinging about someone stealing your territory, and then your territory is being given back to you, you don't whinge about the fact that, oh, that's going to be disruptive. Like, what do you want? Like, you in it or not? Like, for fuck's sake. And you kind of feel like just saying to them, mate, if you don't want to do the job, just piss off. Go and get a job at Macca's to do something else. It's like, just fucking man up. I'm frustrated by this. Honestly, opportunities come along every quarter century like this, and you either take it or get out of the road and let somebody else do it. It's really simple, right? So it, I don't think the Perplexity is viewing this as an incredibly disruptive irritation. Oh my
no.
God. And the guys at OpenAI are just like, oh, not taking over Chrome. Oh, come on. Like they're all like leaping at it. So you either have the energy to be the future or just get out of the road, right? And
Mm,
so I'm about to go on a whole, well, I'm actually with you in London shortly,
uh,
and then I'm in New York straight after that. And then I'm in Minneapolis with publishers about 2 weeks after that. I really hope they're not going to all come to me and just go, "Oh, I could really do without this. Can you like put it back in the bottle?" That's not going to happen, right? So the
yeah.
future's going to happen to you whether you like it or not. You have to be on board or don't. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, by the way, if you do go and sit down and read through all those numbers in the 10K and the SEC filings and all that kind of stuff from Google, it's as clear as day they're preparing to be broken up. They know it's coming. They've already accepted it. They're going to appeal. We talked about this last week. They'll
Mm,
definitely appeal because they have to, because they've got
yeah.
shareholders, right? They just have to go through the machinations, but they know they're going to lose. This is an inevitability. I can see them moving money from this pool of money to this pool
Yeah.
of money and then talking about this while doing something else over here. They're doing exactly what you or I would do in the same situation when we're trying to manage what we know is going to be a sunsetting asset. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they are doing that right now. And it's as clear as day in the numbers. All right. And so, really, what I'm trying to do with the newsletter is to try and translate the numbers into an actual narrative as to
Yeah.
what's actually happening.
So just to throw in, so this week Google also announced sort of that they weren't going to do something they've been talking about since I think 2019 or something, which was taking third party cookies out of Chrome.
Yeah.
And again, there was a sort of the sense back was, oh God, we've wasted so much time. And actually, publishing execs, Google themselves, the sort of the IABs, the AOPs of this world have spent hours and hours and hours discussing, the kind of deprecating cookies in Chrome. And so there was a bit of confusion this week about why would they do that. And you say, well, of course they're going to do that because if the court gets its way, they are a third party in Chrome,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's why they're not going to get rid of third party cookies because they're going to need them. So you're absolutely
Yeah,
right.
of course.
They're preparing exactly for what we think is going to come. I guess for publishers, and maybe this is it struck me this week that there's a bit more work probably for planners and strategists and people like us to do to just to say, well, okay, what are the most likely outcomes? Because at the moment, I think there's too much; it's too opaque. And so because people can't really see what's going to come out the other side, it's hard to then decide which way to jump. But that will become
Yeah.
clearer, I suppose, as the weeks go by.
So, May, you and I have been at this for like 50 years combined, right? Well, literally. Yeah.
Mm,
We are actually that old. Sorry, mate.
mm,
But you and I are on stage shortly in London. We're going to have an audience of people who are living in this opaque world, who are
mm,
really nervous about what's happening. They're looking to us to try and guide them. And, I'm having this conversation now with some of our audience sitting here on the line. You want to be able to tell them something optimistic. So you want to be able to say there's a future here. Because I genuinely think there is. I think there's a real opportunity here to do new and interesting things. But you can only do that if you're willing to change,
mm.
right? And so when I'm asked, oh, Ricky, make sure you say something optimistic so people leave the room feeling good. You can only feel good if you actually want to win. If you're
Mm,
just there to pass the time, nothing I'm going to tell you is going to make you feel good because your life's about to be a little bit more complicated. So you then, what I do is I tend to resile back into my own skin and I go, all right, well, I'll tell them what I think they should do. I think you should do this and this and this and this. And then you listen to yourself and you go, no, these people are executives. They earn the big bucks, right? They should be able to decide this. I
mm.
shouldn't tell them what they should do. So I'm kind of stuck, and I'm really interested in what your advice would be because, on one hand, you really want them to get to the future better, but at the
Yeah.
same time, you don't want to preach to them about what to do. But if you don't do either, they just go, it's too hard and put their hands up. What do you do?
Yeah. Well, I thought this. I mean, my sort of take from a lot of similar conversations this week was um, actually, when you think about it, not many of those execs, and including probably me when I was in those jobs, because these monopolies have been so entrenched and so part of the fabric, and that was kind of the world you worked in. If you take a sort of analogy, if you look at the UK has two print wholesalers, right? Smiths and Menzies, and they've been in place for years, and they operate in a certain way, and the market's kind of set that way, and so it's not something that as the exec you spend a lot of time thinking about because
Yeah,
it's an immovable object, and so you can negotiate like once every 5 years you negotiate a deal where you might get a slightly better percentage here, a slightly better thing there, and but gradually it kind of moves on. It's just not something that is a lever for growth. And what struck me this week was that actually for most kind of publishing execs who are dealing with a whole raft of kind of urgent, non-urgent problems and budgets to hit and all the rest of it, um, actually they haven't really thought about digital distribution from a kind of first principles perspective for some time. That they've thought about,
mm-hmm.
look, Google's changed this algorithm, therefore we'll do this. We danced effectively to other people's tunes. And as the platforms have shifted, we've
100%.
shifted a bit of this, shifted a bit of that. But that's tactics. And I think what the conversation that maybe is more fruitful is to sort of step back and say, okay, let's assume that the world of distribution in digital media is up for grabs. So first of all, we have to decide what is it we're distributing. Are we an articles company, in which case we're a content creator? We might go one route. Are we a kind of a news service or an information service, in which case we might go another route? Are we kind of selling audio, video? So first of all, what are we trying to distribute? And therefore, what's the kind of outcome that we want to get out of this? And trying, I think, to get to enable those planning conversations to think about a world that right now really hasn't been properly thought through for 20 years. And I think that's part of the big challenge. It's just not a sort of a muscle that most organizations really have exercised at a strategy level, as opposed to a kind of quarterly tactics. I've been hit by a big wave, therefore I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And that's a different type of thinking. That was my sort of reflection from the week. Quite hard to do because it's easier in some ways when you're not also trying to hit that quarterly budget. And that's the reality for a lot of the execs that we're talking to is, you are both trying to think about how can I reimagine digital media, but also how can I find 10% of my kind of revenue that's just changed. And it's tough to do those two things at once. So, that'd be my take.
That's brilliant. No, you're absolutely right. And part of the, challenge really, isn't it, that the news industry has been reacting, not proactive for ages. Somebody at Google once said to me, Ricky, what I don't really understand is like, how are you guys ever supposed to build a strategy if all you ever budget for is the next 90 days? And I said, well, okay, let me tell you how it works. So if you're an Olympic athlete and you're a brilliant 100-meter runner, okay, absolutely the best in the world, and then someone locks you in a box and then systematically removes the oxygen from the box, let's see how fast that guy can run 100 meters. Yeah. And I reckon that he's not any worse a sprinter. He's just suffocating. And I
Mm,
said, do you know what? How he breathes. When he's breathing out in the air, in the oxygen, he breathes like this. Nice deep breath, runs a 9.5 second 100 meters. Fantastic.
yeah.
You put him in a box with no oxygen in it, he pants like that. That's what you've done to our P&L. Okay, because we're literally panting to be able to have enough money to make the next quarter. So it's not that we're unfit, you cock. It's that you've taken all our fucking money and we want it back. Yeah. And one of these days we're going to get an opportunity or somebody's going to turn up that's decided it wants to get in this fight. Okay. And they're going to take it back. And then you're going to learn what it's like to be locked in that box. That's kind of what it feels like. I think the question then is, okay, so let's say we're out of the box. How many of us have still got the energy to fight the fight? And I think that's what we're about to find out. And I think that's. I really, really hope the energy still exists.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't think it does. I think you probably just got to get to a slightly more clear kind of battleground for that to be kind of dictated on. Um, yeah. Anything else in the Google court case?
No, I think that it's proceeding. I think look, Google, look, as we said, I think
Mm,
Google's accepted it's gonna happen. I think that Judge Amit Mehta, like just if there wasn't enough confusion already, Meta's over there, there's Meta in this. There's a Meta in both courts,
yeah,
right? So I think that he's made up his mind. He's just deciding which of these remedies can happen. The
yeah,
interesting one is what happens to Chrome. That's what everybody's focused on. And I think it's a good thing to be focused on. As you said, we've got OpenAI in the mix, we've got Yahoo in the mix, we've got Perplexity in the mix. I still think the publishing industry should make a pitch for it. I think it's got a very strong argument if
mm,
it can get itself sorted out. I think there's a lot of opportunities there, but it's going to be very, very difficult. What's more interesting, though, if you're trying to solve the immediate cash flow problem, though, is what happens to the ad tech. So, if GAM or Google Ad Manager and AdX get freed up and everybody can have access to that, and then really that's the point, isn't it? If the money is freed and the money flows back to publishers and publishers bank $4 billion more this year because of these changes, you might suddenly find
yeah,
everybody's got the energy again, right? That's all.
yeah. But it is like, I suppose in timing, you've got two cases. So the first one is the one that's in remedies at the moment, which is probably going to say Apple, you can't do the kind of default deal.
Yeah,
Google, you have to sell Chrome.
yeah.
You have to do something about sharing kind of search index data. And I think
Well,
those are
that's
really
that's a cracker.
but those
That's a
those are probably
cracker.
the big headlines. The one that's sort of following it in is the AdX, the ad exchange supply and demand question, which is a lot of where the money is in terms of the kind of percentage of money that's taken out of the market from publishers. Um, that's going to follow on and might be 6-9 months behind. So
Yeah,
what's interesting is you might get a kind of structural. Hold on, I'm holding my fingers up. You might get a structural remedy to the first set that actually, in an ideal world, will overlap with the opening up of our markets, but just timing wise might not. There's another option, I suppose, I would put on the table, which is that there is a kind of internal structural remedy with Google, which says you can still run it as a kind of, because you're the technologist, and there are issues if we separate it, but you have to give equal access at all of these key points to any other competitor who wants to kind of join in on the service. And again, that's going to be sort of, I guess, thought through. I'm not sure
mm.
which one Google would prefer. One of the things that probably has to get shaken out, I suppose, in this case too, is how much of Google's internal data does Chrome have access to? And so, in a kind of separation world, but that at the moment I think has to be kind of put into the light to say, how much actual integration is there between the data that you have in, all of your different Google tools and what Chrome kind of decides to show you.
Yeah, you're right. I'm imagining it's a bit like a Journey to the Center of the Earth. Do you remember that movie? Yeah,
Yeah.
when they kind of walk out of the cave and they go, "Oh my goodness, look at this
Mm.
place!" Right? That's a bit what it's going to be like. As soon as you get inside Google, right, the world's going to get a view at what omnipotence looks like,
Yeah. Yeah.
or isn't. It might turn out all to be like all made up, but
It's going to be like the Wizard of Oz. It would just be a little.
yeah, there's nothing there, but. You have to think that you're going to suddenly get the opportunity to understand everything. As a news guy, and I know Matt Tatty's here on the line. He worked with me at Uvu, the AI company that we ran. Yeah, if you've got access to that much data, you can do amazing things. Imagine what you can do with news and news creation, news discovery, the ability to converse with the headline, the ability to ask 50 questions of the person that's being interviewed by knowing everything they've said in the past. I can see incredible rich opportunities.
Yeah.
once that data's out there and shared and
It's interesting
given to
contrast in
everyone.
some ways. In some ways, we talked about YouTube quite a bit. So YouTube is probably, I would say, the great example definitely within the Google constellation of opening up information to the publishers on it in order to improve, their understanding of what they're doing. So if you can imagine how many people have got, kind of you look at the Stephen Bartlett's of this world, or whatever, how skillful they are at using the internal information in YouTube to create product, then try and translate that over into a world where search is as kind of open, and where the ad exchange is as open. That I think is the bit that's kind of almost hard to visualize, but that's the bit that's coming.
Yeah. I just love the idea that if you have the ability to see everything, how big is your imagination as to what you're going to build next? It
Yeah.
feels a bit like the dawn of the internet all over again, doesn't it? When we all get the opportunity to run in it for the first time. And, that's really, at the end of the day, what all of these court cases have been about. It's why
Mm.
the FTC and the DOJ have been so willing to take such massive risks and take on such massive targets, because the size of the opportunity is so massive if
So
they
big.
pull it off.
Which probably just very neatly kind of takes us over to two other, because this was quite the week. So to two other judgments kind of handed down this week, which are really about that kind of foundational design of the internet. The first one was the EU. So this is now jumped across the EU. So this is out of the US. EU hands down two kind of fines this week. One was to Apple, which was effectively saying you have to allow other app stores to access Apple. So, we've all kind of got used to the fact that Apple built the App Store, Apple built, iTunes and all the other things, and sort of trained you that if you wanted to release an app on Apple, you had to basically use their App Store, pay them 30%, later kind of 30% upfront, 15% later on. And if you wanted to, I remember going back. So we built the very first Times edition on the iPad, and this was on the very first iPad, which had
this is the Times of London for everybody.
Times of London, yes, the original and still the best. This is kind of building on that the iPad, big heavy kind of 18 gig, hardly any memory, but amazing first big touchscreen. And what we had to do at the time is we said, well, we want to have direct subscribers to the Times. And Apple said, if you want to basically have a paid app on Apple, you have to go through iTunes and you have to pay us our 30%. That's how we're going to do it. Sorry, the App Store. Pay us our 30%. And this at the time was a kind of a Rupert Murdoch, Steve Jobs, kind of face off. And eventually the agreement was, if you had, so we had to build a bundled Time subscription, which included the app on the iPad, plus access to the web, plus access to events, plus access to other things. We had to sell a subscription to that separately in the Times store. Then you had to download the app from Apple and you could log in as an existing subscriber. But what you absolutely could not do, 100% could not do, was when you came to download the app on from the App Store, have the choice to say, do you want to sign up with Apple or do you want to sign up with the Times and get all this other stuff? And that was like a canonical kind of no from Apple. So that's been going on for years and years and years. And I think you remember Epic Games kind of had a big kind of challenge to this, which was about, which I think was Fortnite, wasn't it? Which was, do we have to effectively go through the App Store or can we go through our own piece? So that was kind of came down. That judgment is you can't do that. You have to allow other app stores kind of to people to take payments outside of Apple and then enable them on your platform. Big deal. APFD. And the second one was then, which was Meta, which was for this sort of, do you remember? So this is the Digital Markets Act said, I have to be able to kind of opt out of behavioral advertising or kind of deep tracking advertising. And so a lot of publishers, but particularly Meta, said, okay, well, we'll give you, fine, you can have the ability to opt out. Your opt out option is you pay for it. And those of you, so this is called pay or consent, which is a very threatening kind of sounding thing. And a lot of this is going to be an issue, I think, for a lot of publishers who adopted the same thing, particularly German publishers adopted this a lot. But it was basically ruled that Apple couldn't do that, that they had to give under the DMA or the EU. So this is only the EU jurisdiction. You had to have the option to say, I opt out of behavioral advertising or tracking of me as an advertising target, and I get the same service as someone who didn't.
Yeah.
And when you think about that, that is a pretty profound um, kind of piece of judgment, which again comes back to this sort of fundamental design of, well, actually, the sort of the deal is you get this for free, and in return, I get all of your data and I get to monetize it through advertising. Now, if that deal becomes you get this for free and you choose whether I can basically do that with the advertising, and I can't make any difference to the product design or the services that you get, depending on the choice that you make, that is a very foundational challenge, I think, to the kind of you get it for free, and in return, we have a surveillance kind of monetization plan. So,
Mm.
two pretty big deals.
All right. So I'm going to draw a picture for you. Okay. So we're in 1930s New York. I'm wearing a trilby. I've got some shoulder pads. I've got a large pair of kind of beige pants. All right. I've also got a baseball bat, and I've decided to wander up to a guy who runs a pizza shop, and I'm going to say to him, "Hey, mate, how you doing? Look, I've just moved in down the street, and I happen to have this baseball bat. And what I'd really like you to do, okay, is to, well, actually, I was really worried somebody was going to smash your window.
Mm.
Baseball bat. I was worried someone was going to smash your window. But do you know what? If you give me some money, I'll make sure your window doesn't get smashed. That's okay. Is that okay? Just give me the money and I'll make sure the window's okay. And then it won't get smashed because otherwise it could get smashed. Couldn't it? It's blackmail. It's outrageous blackmail. And I'm so happy that the Europeans have just seen through what is an incredibly cynical standover move, right? Give us money, or we're going to take your data and we'll sell it to anybody we feel like, for any reason we like, for as long as we like. And that's just your thing. Good luck. Anyway, goodbye. And oh, by the way, ignore the baseball bat. Okay. I'm actually a really nice guy. No, it's no good. Pay or consent sounds threatening because it is threatening. It's a really, really bad outcome. If I don't want my data to be used because I'm entitled, it assumes that privacy is something you buy. It's not a right, is it?
Do you know what? I think it also assumes that it assumes a level of understanding from the people making those choices that I'm not sure is there. And I think that's the EU's kind of main point in the DMA is that the public, the citizens of Europe, do not understand the business models that really sit behind these. They understand it at a vague level, but they still really think about sort of
Do you
display
really
ads.
think so?
No, I think they understand.
Do you really think the public don't realize they're being sucked like vampires in this business model?
Go to the Meta case, right? I think people understand that they will see advertising on those sites as a result of using them. I think that's the level to which it's understood. I think take the examples of so Meta, we know, have sort of sold to advertisers data on teenage girls who have deleted a selfie. The minute that you delete a selfie, you become an advertising target because you're seen to be vulnerable in an emotional state, and you may be more likely to buy a product. I don't think that is something that the general public understands is possible. I also don't think they understand the extent to which the collection of data is universal across the web, rather than just when they're using the app itself. I don't think they understand the extent to which the social graph and lookalike modeling and content, I don't think they understand the sophistication that sits behind the ad targeting world. And I also don't think they understand the value of it. And when you put all those things together, then I would say, no, I don't think they do understand it. I think that for most people almost understand. I'm generalizing on behalf of the citizens of Europe, which is a bit grand, but I think if you go back to sort of print advertising, people understand there's content, then there's an ad. I think most people's understanding of digital advertising is that there's content, and sometimes there's going to be a contextual ad that's served against it, and that's as far as it goes. And one of the challenges, I think, we've mentioned this before, one of the challenges for publishers everywhere and is actually to make clear that this model is entirely different in scope and sophistication, and entirely driven by monetization with very little kind of regard for anything else. That's not clear, I don't think.
If a government decided to surveil its people to this extent, and was doing it for monetary gain, okay, I would expect that the publishing industry that you and I are part of would be outraged by that. In history, people have gone to war for things like that. But the publishing industry has failed, in my opinion. If the public doesn't understand this, that's a failure of the news industry, of what we stand for. Our job is to look out for people and to make the complicated simple, to make them understand these things. But we haven't seen anything other than some really big examples from perhaps the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg or the Guardian on occasion. Really, this has been the biggest scandal of our generation, and yet it's had so little coverage as to be quite astonishing.
Yeah, and so that comes back to the Meta case in September. I think we'll kind of pull out more of this, but it'll be interesting to see now whether so actually that is for. I mean, I'm sure people know this, but that is part of the reason why the EU does tend to be heavier on privacy, because the EU has within it a number of states who were in the Soviet kind of era who were heavily surveillance state. They have people who are in East Germany, which was a surveillance state. And so they have their kind of institutional memory, which guides them to a privacy kind of basis for a lot of the legislation, which a lot of other places don't have. Your flip side is obviously, you look at the kind of Chinese internet, which is based on that kind of citizen surveillance. That's why I think the fact that Meta were trying to work on censorship tools with the Chinese was, again, such a delicate kind of moment.
Well, they were perfectly qualified, I guess, if you view it through that lens.
Yeah.
I mean, look, this is all going to shake out, right? So we are in a time of extreme turmoil and chaos. And I'm going to say this again, because I said it last week, I said it the week before that, I say it on stage all the time. Chaos is okay, all right? Chaos gives new entrants and new ideas an opportunity to flourish. Might feel a little bit uncomfortable. It does change the status quo. But if you're in a monopoly, you have zero chance of winning at all. If you have a chance to, in a world of chaos, then you have the fittest have a chance to survive. Survival of the fittest or survival of the fattest. We've had 25 years of survival of the fattest. It's time for other people to have a go. So I'm happy for chaos to happen. We've got a question. What was that saying there?
I think it's Graham just saying he agrees that general citizens' ad literacy is very low, and AI literacy is probably lower. So these are all challenges I think for people to educate on. I think that's got to come. Interesting, actually. If you had a competitive market, so can you imagine going to private equity and say, "Hey, look, I've got a great idea for you. I'm going to create a social media network, and I'm not going to use behavioral advertising or targeting at all. I'm going to compete with Meta and Google, using a model that is not to do with ads." How long do you think that conversation would be? Whereas actually, in a genuinely, if this market really opens up, you do start to think, well, okay, then there are opportunities for people to say, well, okay, this is a different model. This is based on a different kind of exchange, transactional basis. Those models again become possible where really they haven't been. And so that's the whole argument the competition authorities will make, is the innovation is only possible when there is a chance of succeeding. So that's why I'd say go right back to the start of the podcast this morning. That's why it feels like, although we have kind of ups and downs, and this is, it's a very emotional journey for us all. The kind of the general trend is that, we are going to win, I think, the chance to kind of re-innovate in a lot of these markets.
I think we are. We're joined, everybody, just so you know, by some Substack royalty. We've got Graham Lovelace is on. And, he's just said, it's up to us as publishers, creators, and citizens to educate people and politicians. Do you know, Graham, I know you feel it. Chris, I know you feel it. I feel that every single day. Honestly, I feel more empowered to do the right thing now than I did when I was the head of news of a newspaper read by 60 million people. And it feels more important now than ever. I never knew that my desire to execute my mission would become so intense that, I've been in here in my office at 4 o'clock in the morning every single day this week because I've got to pick up I've got to carry off what's happening at the end of America here in Australia. And so I really, really know with a capital letters how important this is. And we do have to do it. We just have to keep going, I guess. We just have to be indefatigable. We just have to keep going until it's done. Just thank you to you, Graham. Thank you to you, Chris. Thank you to all of us that are doing this. Let's see if we can get it over the line. It feels like there is a downhill roll to the breakup of these companies. We're going to win the war. I guess we've got to get ready to win the peace, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Onwards. All right. Well, look, everyone, thanks for joining. That's our largest group of people on this Substack Live ever. It's also been massive traffic. I don't know about you, Chris, but it's been absolutely wild traffic for me on the Substack this week. We will keep on charging. And hang on. I love these Scotch sessions after a week trying to run a media business. Sometimes it's the only thing that makes me positive enough to turn up again on Monday. Mate, let me tell you, this one I can strongly recommend. But hang on, don't go, because if you're really feeling it and you want to forget Sunday altogether, go for this baby that I hide over here in the bushes. Man, this thing it's 47.4% proof and it's only 5 years old. It's like petrol. But I'll tell you what, it does solve all your problems for a short period. So just letting you know, Stephen, there you go. Yeah.
All right. Great to see you all. Thanks so much. We will catch you on. See you next.
See ya. Bye-bye.
See ya.